Asia, we're ready.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting the stream.
Super. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's 12:08 p.m. on Tuesday, March 12th. We're here at 1520 Market Street on the second floor. And thank you all for joining us. Thank you to those who are joining us in person here, as well as those joining us virtually. Um, Tommy, could you go ahead and share the screen?
Let's count to 30, 40, now 44.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us, for taking time out of this beautiful day to hear a little bit about some of these funding opportunities. And we've got some more folks joining us in person now. But if, Tom, I know we can see it here in person really well, but if we can make sure that the presentation is being shared virtually. Perfect. Let's get started. Next slide, please. So we're here today to talk about three funding opportunities that are currently open for application from the community. And these include our neighborhood plan implementation NOFA, 1.6, yes? Sure, I'll speak up. Sure. Our neighborhood plan implementation NOFA, that's a $1.6 million funding opportunity of economic development sales tax funds. Our neighborhood capacity building grants program administration program, and that's $400,000 available for small quick wins grants for neighborhood capacity building, and a $500,000 community development grants program administration opportunity available in particular for small grants to activate vacant property and transform our vacant lots from liabilities to assets. So our agenda today, I'm just going to start by talking about CDA and these grants at a very high level. I'll toss to our team to dig into the details of each of the various funding opportunities. And then finally, we'll close with Q&A. And we'll also in particular want to hear from you all any questions or issues that you've run into as you're using our new application portal. We recently launched a Salesforce grants management system, including a fully online application portal. Applications submitted by email or in person will not be accepted. So we want to make sure that we hear how it's going, any questions you're running into. I cannot promise that we'll be able to answer all these questions today, but we will have a follow-up session with the development team who is building this portal before the applications are due. And we want to just collect your feedback right now so that we can use that to inform and prepare for that presentation and make sure that we prepare that presentation to respond to any pain points that you all are facing. So that's a brief agenda. Next slide, please. I see a question here about the agenda about whether we'll be talking about the Home ARP Permanent Supportive Housing funding opportunity. The answer is no, not at this hearing. We do have a recorded video of over 2.5 hours, I believe, where our housing team went over the housing funding opportunities in great detail and answered questions. And then if there are any questions outstanding, you can feel free to submit those to CDA NOFA at stlouis-mo.gov. And we will answer those questions within a week and post those answers publicly as well. But there is a pre-recorded, well, another webinar just like this one that we held almost a month ago with our housing team that's on YouTube now. And if anyone can drop that link into the chat for Linda, that'd be great. So about CDA, as many of you all know, CDA serves as a clearinghouse for a variety of federal, state, and local funds for the city of St. Louis. We're charged by Mayor Jones to deploy these funds to drive our economic justice agenda, which we do by funding a wide range of public and nonprofit partners to provide social services, build affordable housing, combat blight, and conduct neighborhood transformation activities. And so how does these three grant funding opportunities that I just talked about fit into our economic justice plan? The first point that economic justice really stands for is equity is a precondition to growth, and that we're not going to be able to grow as a city until we heal the scars of intentional disinvestment in North St. Louis, of intentional policies such as redlining, appraisal gaps, restrictive covenants that resulted in segregation by design. And so we have to be equally creative and intentional in the policies that we deploy to counteract that. And that's the first point. And we believe that these three programs support economic justice, in particular, with respect to empowering the community to drive development. That's, I think, a through line through all three of these opportunities. The neighborhood plan implementation really starts with planning, with a community coming together to identify what are the priority needs in a community. And we really want to empower, as a broader goal of economic development, the community to be in the driver's seat. Too often we see developers coming in top down saying, this is what the community needs, this is what we want to see. Here we're trying to reverse that. And so that empowerment is a core thread here. The other thing we're doing with these small grants programs is that historically CDA has not provided $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 small grants. And so what happened is that we assessed the ecosystem and we concluded that this was a real gap, that we were providing larger grants, $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 grants, but that the ecosystem, in order to have economic justice, in order to empower communities, really needed these smaller dollar grant awards that could also have reduced administrative burdens attached. And so that's where these two programs that we'll be talking about come in. What we want to do here is really introduce a new CDA grant product. But frankly, we don't have the capacity ourselves to run hundreds of small grants through the city's contract execution system. And that's why at this moment, what we're doing is we're requesting proposals from nonprofits with experience and capacity who can help us stand up this new small grants program. And to be clear, there are nonprofits that are currently engaging in this work across the St. Louis region, and we really want to partner with them and help scale that great work. The other big through line here is these are called neighborhood transformation grants, and that's something that each of these grant opportunities intend to do. What we want to see in particular with the neighborhood plan implementation opportunity, where it's $1.6 million to fund 2 neighborhood plan implementation efforts, we want to see transformation. We want to see leverage. We want to see you all go big and think big about what can be done in these communities, and how a small amount, a large amount of funding can leverage even bigger change. So we are aiming for transformation. Next slide. I've already talked at a high level about these funds, and our team will dig into them in a lot of detail. But the key point here is that this exists within a broader funding cycle, which also includes a significant amount of funds for affordable housing, including $9.6 million for permanent supportive housing, $6 million for affordable housing rental and for sale, and $2.5 million of ARPA funds for vacant unit turns. And again, there's that webinar already recorded about those first 3. What we're going to be focusing in on today are the neighborhood plan implementation funds, the neighborhood capacity building funds, and the community development grants programs. I'll also note that we have $1 million currently available for application, I believe through the 14th, for historic home repair program and construction management services. Essentially, this will be a new facet to our home repair program. And so we're seeking support in particular from contractors who have experience working on historic homes. Next slide. So 2 of the funding opportunities that we'll talk about today are funded by the economic development sales tax. affectionately called EcoDevo. So what is this? It's a half-cent sales tax approved by city voters in 2017. It's authorized by state statute, and the Board of Aldermen passed a bill in 2017 asking voters to authorize this half-cent sales tax for transit, neighborhood revitalization, workforce development, public safety, and infrastructure. It's also supervised by the Economic Development Sales Tax Board. So every year, city departments who are working to spend these funds go to the board, say, here's our plan. And then that gets reflected in the budget that then ultimately goes through ENA and the Board of Aldermen for adoption. So in this year's budget, FY24 budget, we included funding, 1.6 million in funding for neighborhood plan implementation. That's what these funds are. Again, in context, these are all neighborhood revitalization funds. And so each year, this half-cent sales tax raises about $20 million. Where does this money go? 60% of it goes into transit. And we've actually built up now a fund of about $90 million, which exists as matching funds and leverage for the eventual construction of North-South Metrolink. It's this source of funding that is preparing us and really moving us towards submitting an application to the Department of Transportation for new starts for the North-South Side Metrolink running down Jefferson from Fairgrounds Park in the north to Chippewa in the south. And not only is this $90 million roughly of cash that we have on hand, it also has financing capacity of about $350 million, which means that we have essentially that 50% match for North-South Metrolink, which should the Department of Transportation accept our application, it's a long process, we'll essentially have the program fully funded and the construction fully funded. Which is exciting. So that's transit. But the basic vision of the economic development sales tax is that transit alone doesn't fix everything. There's no silver bullet. You have to make holistic investments if you want to see neighborhood transformation. And that's why it was paired with flexible funding for neighborhood revitalization, for workforce development, for public safety, and for infrastructure, so that we can invest holistically in neighborhoods. The neighborhood revitalization funds, again, about $2 million a year, is both for planning work, which the planning department administers, and implementation work, which is the $1.6 million that we're talking about today. And the last thing I'll note is that the board bill, Ordinance 70435, really provided a framework for the implementation grants that the aldermen and ultimately the voters wanted to see. And this was really inspired by choice neighborhoods. And there's three core principles there. One is that they want to see it be community driven. As I talked about before, you really need to point to a plan, point to the engagement that was conducted and say, this is what the neighborhood wants. This is really the priority. Second, it needs to be place-based. We want to see focused transformation strategies. We don't recommend spreading this out over a whole broad area or even necessarily the whole plan area, but identify a spread, a focused spread of a radius, 5 square blocks. I'm not going to tell you exactly how much, but identify a place-based focus and say, here's where we're going to invest. And this is the little pocket that we are going to fully try and transform with these funds, but also with leverage. And that's the third key point, is that we want to see private and philanthropic sector leverage in these applications. So that's the economic development sales tax and some high level about what it's for. Next slide. And then the $500,000 community development block grant community development grant program is funded with CDBG. Many of you are familiar with CDBG, may have received CDBG funds in the past. Just at a high level, these are federal formula funds that are awarded to the city of St. Louis on an annual basis. They need to be used on one of the following 3 activities: benefiting persons of low and moderate income, elimination of slums and blight, and urgent need. In this case, we're really focusing on that elimination of slums and blight for this program, which is going to be designed to activate vacant lots and transform them from a liability into an asset. There are also special allocations. This isn't one of them. So what I will flag is that the 2024 CDBG funds were awarded to the following priorities: $4.4 million to public services, $1.7 million to LRA lot maintenance, the $500,000 previously discussed to community development grants, and then a variety of other funds for homeowner assistance, housing construction, economic development, public improvements, planning, and administration. But this is a new program for us, and it's innovative, and we'll talk a little bit about how it will work, and why we really want to partner with a nonprofit with that capacity to administer the program. Next slide. I think that's almost it for me, but before I toss it over to our team to go over each of these funding opportunities, I was asked to plug our CDA e-newsletter. It's a great way to get information about all these programs as these funding opportunities come out, as we may have updates to them. Encourage you to go to www.stlouis.mo.gov/cda/#subscribe. Thank you all very much. I'll now toss it over to James to talk about our neighborhood plan implementation NOFA. Next slide.
Hi, everybody. As Noel said, my name is James Pfister. I'm a planner here at CDA. Thank you all for those in the room for coming in today, and those online. Thanks for inviting us into your homes or offices or coffee shops. This is a great opportunity for us because we do all of this work behind the scenes to put out these big long RFPs, these NOFAs. It's a good opportunity for us to hopefully have some back and forth, answer some questions. We want the best applications we can get, so we want to help you, answer whatever questions you've got. I'm going to be talking about the 2 EcoDevo funded programs. That's the neighborhood plan implementation and the community capacity building grant program. Next slide, please. First, specifically to the neighborhood plan implementation, hopefully you're all aware the deadline for submitting these applications is March 29th. This slide says 5 p.m. A slide later says 4:59 p.m. Regardless, please get them in ahead of time because that is a really sharp cutoff for submitting applications in our portal. We don't exactly know when we're going to announce the funding award. But it takes us a month or 2 to review all of these great applications. We'll get them out in a timely manner. Next slide, please. As Noel stated, we have $1.6 million of EcoDevo to spend on 2 projects or programs or collections of projects and programs in areas with an approved neighborhood plan. And in a moment, I'm going to hand it over to our colleagues in the planning department to give some background about just the neighborhood planning process, what has happened in the past, what's coming down the line in the future. And in fact, I will do that right now.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining this pre-submittal call. My name is Jonathan Roper with the Planning and Urban Design Agency, and I'm here with...
My name's Alexis Seda, and I'm a senior planner with the Planning and Urban Design Agency.
And we are the ones responsible for helping neighborhoods adopt neighborhood plans, and we started a new program for neighborhood planning. So if you don't have neighborhood plans, you don't see yourselves on the list as Mr. Pfister and Mr. Pfeffer noted earlier, hopefully we'll be coming to a community near you pretty soon. But today we're here to talk about what a neighborhood plan actually is in brief, and then also where these areas are eligible. So a neighborhood plan is an adopted guide for the city. It's an action plan. It's filled with strategies, community consensus about what should happen in an area. This is based upon not only what you guys want to see in your communities, but also data, and as well as a lot of best practices from new housing strategies, new transportation strategies, new strategies to improve parks, open space, commercial corridors, and businesses and such. These plans include, they're based upon some type of existing conditions or analysis of what is there today and what are some of the issues with what's going on and what do we want to see in the future. So after that, what do we want to see? We also add strategies to accomplishing whatever goals or objectives that you have for an area. We want to have partnerships with you as well. So identify those city departments, such as CDA here, and other departments to help make that possible. These neighborhood plans do a lot of visualization of what the future may look like in your area, and as well as more implementation with funding sources and other resources at that. Next slide, please.
Okay, so if you are here, that means you have a neighborhood plan. And so the areas that, as you can see on the screen, for those that are online and those in the room, there are 5 neighborhood plans that we have within the last 6 years. So that covers the West End and Visitation Park neighborhood, followed by North Central, which is the Van and Covenant Blue Grand Center, also Design Downtown, which is our downtown area, the Gravois Jefferson Historic Neighborhoods Plan, which was adopted in 2018, and then also our Skinker Developer Neighborhood Plan, which just encompasses the Skinker Developer neighborhood. So this is a great time. You guys have put in the work in the last 6 years, and guess what? There's funding to implement something within that plan. So I think this is very serendipitous, and I'm glad that you all are here, and wish you a successful application.
Yeah. Let's do like that.
City's website, along with it's on the city's. If you're actually on the city's page, you can go to the Planning Urban Design Agency adopted plans, and you'll find them there too. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Alexa. Just one note. Just sort of the rationale or the justification behind these neighborhood plans. There is a lot of really good neighborhood planning work already underway and coming down the pipeline in the next couple of years. And the city and our departments are going to make the best effort to fund and implement those plans as they are adopted. But we didn't want these neighborhoods with adopted approved plans already to sort of be left out of this implementation push. So that's why we're focusing on these recently completed and adopted neighborhood plans. All right, next slide, please, Tommy. So I want to talk a little bit about what the eligible activities are for neighborhood plan implementation. In a sense, it is, or in a very broad sense, it's whatever identified goals, strategies, or implementation activities that are contained within these approved neighborhood plans. There's pretty broad leeway for what constitutes an eligible activity. You neighborhood members, you community members, whether you helped create the plans or not, you know best what your neighborhoods and what your communities need. So we're going to ask you to propose the activities that you think your neighborhood needs the most, justify how they align with your neighborhood plan. We know that a neighborhood plan, once you hit print on that PDF, it's not done. It's not a static document. Just because an activity is not explicitly listed as an implementation goal or strategy within the plan does not mean it cannot be funded. But we also are going to ask you to justify why the program or activity that you are proposing does align with the approved neighborhood plan. We're not experts in those plans as much as we would like to be. So help us out. If there's something that you're proposing that is not explicitly stated within the neighborhood plan, that's fine. Just justify why it's being included, how it will help implement sort of the core, the heart and soul of the plan itself. Also a note that, sorry, I gotta make it bigger. We were editing this thing like 7 minutes before we went live. So there are certain proposed activities that you want to see implemented or undertaken with this grant funding that might be best carried out or administered by a city department. It's okay if you haven't, already lined up exactly who and what department is doing what. That's something that CDA can assist with if you are awarded, but go ahead and dream big. It's your neighborhood association or nonprofit might not be set up or have the capacity to do. Yeah, please.
I think the really concrete example here is park improvements. So if part of the neighborhood plan involves improving a park, but obviously that would best be done through the Parks Department, but you want to dedicate funds to that, then the application would say, here are the parks improvements that we would want. And that won't necessarily go to your organization to then go to parks. That would become very convoluted. But instead, it'll just be, you're applying for it. We'll talk to the Parks Department, see if they are aligned with this work. And if they are, then we would fund the project through the Parks Department and implement it through the city. So that's the concrete example. There may be others that we can explore. The other quick word that I'll just add in, we're talking about how we want to see this really tied to the neighborhood plan. I think that an ideal application in my mind just gives an overview of what is the neighborhood plan, What was the engagement that produced it? What was the dialogue that produced it? What has been done to implement it already to date? Right? Because that's a form of leverage as well. We want to see future leverage, but we want to also know what have you done to date, and then what is the plan to take it to the next level with these funds.
Go ahead, go to the next slide, please. Eager to see what it is. Yeah, we wanted to make a note about what types of activities are not exactly being pursued by the SNOFA. In particular, housing production or rehab. We are not very interested in funding with this money. We have, high quality, regular funding programs for housing. And we want your neighborhoods and communities to pursue the funding that is explicitly for those projects. This is intended to be separate. It's bigger, it's targeted. So be thinking outside of that. Also, we don't just want to get a grab bag of community priorities and fund it. It's okay if what you're proposing or what you're applying for is, a collection of activities or programs, but there needs to be real intentionality behind it. Think strategically about how what you're applying for or what you're proposing is proactively implementing, it's revitalizing your neighborhoods and your communities. This isn't a strict, there's no cutoff, like you can't apply for more than 6 programs, but just be thinking more comprehensively about your applications. All right, next slide, please, Tommy. This is all in the NOFA, so I'll gloss over it pretty quickly. Our eligible applicants are you all community members, nonprofits, neighborhood associations, CDCs, developers who have relationships with neighborhood or place-based organizations. But we did want to highlight, we're encouraging people to form teams, as large teams as possible. It will go a long way, I think, in collecting leverage, but also making sure you are able to fully implement, these larger projects, these larger portions of the neighborhood plan. We especially encourage groups from the same neighborhoods or the same geographies to work collaboratively. It's okay if multiple applications have been made and you kind of cancel some of them and coalesce or start new applications at this point. But I just wanted to say that we are not going to give explicit favor to teams of neighborhood groups, but it does show perhaps a greater capacity to implement the plan on a larger scale if you're working in teams. Next slide, please, Tom. Again, this is all in the RFP, but I wanted to note towards the criteria and the bonus points. The major considerations are making sure that your programs are aligned with the neighborhood plan. We're making sure your organizations are qualified, and we want to make sure that your award, this money, will actually have a tangible impact. We are offering bonus points that most of these neighborhoods will be able to take advantage of in some case, but we're awarding bonus points for if your proposed activities are within one of the economic justice index tracks. If you are, what is it? Is it quarter mile of the north side, south side alignment? Within a quarter mile, or is it half mile?
I thought it was
Half mile. Whether or not your activity is within a promise zone, or if your activity or proposal is within a neighborhood revitalization strategy area. All right, next slide, Tom. As you all know, we're only accepting applications through our online portal on Salesforce. We will have some time for some Q&A specifically about the portal later, but there will be a dedicated Salesforce training later in the month. So look for news about that. Next slide. Again, we don't know exactly when we'll make these awards, but it will be sometime in the second quarter. It'll take us, 6 to 8 weeks. Everything will be funded, or everything will be posted and communicated to the applicants in a timely manner. Next slide, please. We had a question that came in on our CA email about when the dollars need to be spent. We don't have really a hard cutoff for when these dollars that, if awarded, need to be spent. That said, we want to see these programs funded and activated as expeditiously as possible. So we're suggesting that all of the money, the leverage and the award money, can be spent by the end of 2026. So keep that in mind. Next slide, please. As I stated, Application deadline is March 29th. All of the programs we're talking about today, application is March 29th for 59 p.m. Next slide. Contact info, you know who we are. That's the email address. Next slide, please. All right, wonderful. Again, full Q&A at the end, so keep your brilliant questions in your head. I'm now going to talk briefly about the Neighborhood Capacity Building Grant Program Administration opportunity. Next slide. Noelle already did a great job of summarizing what these grant programs are meant to do and how we want to see them work. The big thing is we are looking for a partner to help build this program with us. We have certain goals of what these individual awards are going to look like, but we are going to rely on the expertise of the nonprofit or the local group who has run small grant programs like this in the past and work with us as we build a scope so that we can be funding those smaller projects, those gap projects that help prepare communities and neighborhoods for larger neighborhood planning and implementation down the line. Next slide, please. Thank you. Again, eligible candidates, they're nonprofits in good standing. They should have some knowledge and some proof of experience administering small grants programs. Ideally, we would like to have an applicant that has an existing or a previous small grant program that we can kind of expand or graft onto or at least learn from. Next slide, please. So the goal for these grants is just to provide a contrast between the other grant program, which is more about vacant lot activation. These are for community groups to fund small to mid-sized projects that increase capacity, increase stakeholder buy-in, community building, whatever that means to your community. Grants will be between $2,000 and $10,000. We hope to award more than 35 grants within the time period, which is 2026. It's the cutoff for this period as well. Yeah, we'll go to the next slide. Again, we have a third different deadline for the online portal. Regardless, March 29th is the deadline for these applications. Be aware, get them in as early as possible. Next slide, please. Again, we are going to be reviewing these applications with the rigor that we review all of our applications. We want to make sure that it's a complete application. The firms responding have the relevant qualifications and experience. You don't necessarily need to be in the city, but you need to be knowledgeable of the neighborhoods and the communities of the city. So hopefully you are in or near the city of St. Louis. Next slide. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. I am now going to turn it over to my colleague, Rashawn Alexander, to talk about the third funding program.
James mentioned in the previous RFP about building capacity. And so these kind of work in tandem with one another. So we have provided an opportunity for funding to build the capacity for the community. And this one in particular is, okay, now we have the capacity and we want you now to use that capacity to activate some vacant lots. And this is what this grant is about. Next slide. The city of St. Louis has roughly 24,000 vacant parcels, and we need your help in activating them and beautifying them and creating a more beautiful landscape for our citizens. And we can't do it alone. And this opportunity is for a nonprofit to administer the small grants to churches or schools or other organizations who want to do the work because they've identified a specific parcel that they know is nearby or could use the services. So we're seeking the support to combat vacancy and slum and blight. Next slide. I mentioned that the applicant should be a nonprofit organization, but you should also be familiar with administering small grants, have knowledge of federal, state, and local reporting requirements, and then be able to demonstrate experience working with smaller grassroots organizations who may not be familiar with the intricacies of federal government and grant making, and then just residents. Next slide. The selected nonprofit will be administering grants between 5 and 15,000. A minimum of 40 grants we expect to be deployed over this 2 or so year period, approximately beginning the grant making in May of this year, ending around October of 2026. And then grants will be eligible for programs that take place in qualified census tracts and then our economic justice index areas. You can find more information about the EJI and the vacancy to vibrancy strategy on CDA's website, but then also on the City of St. Louis website if you're interested. The Economic Justice Action Plan is a really good tool and a really good reference for the vision of this entire program in addition to this one in particular. Next slide. We are consistent with our deadline. March 29th at 4 p.m. is when all applications are due, and they will be submitted to the proposal link there at cdagrants.stlouis-mo.gov. Next slide. The selection process, the criteria for evaluation are included in the RFP, but it's nonprofits. We want to make sure that you have capacity, technical ability, flexibility, a budget that aligns with the program that you are submitting. And then the selection will be made around second quarter of this year for any nonprofit that decides to do this work. Next slide. And it's time for questions. And hopefully we have some answers to give you about what we presented this afternoon. The floor is yours. Thank you for all that have attended here in person. We appreciate your time. And then for those of you online, thank you as well. Let's go with questions. Yes, sir. We have somebody in the room.
I'll take the first stab at this. Oh, thank you. So the question from the room was, are there examples of what the Community Capacity Building Grant Program Administration, what that program would look like or what those funds would be used for? Yeah, there are lots of different local, small grant funding opportunities, whether it's nonprofits or, lending institutions. So far as what we want these small grants to fund, capacity building, I know is a broad term, but we want to leave it broad. We want to build the scope in partnership with who we award these funds to administer the program. But we anticipate the things that help make a neighborhood association run. Maybe it's supplies for an event. Maybe it's supplies for gardening or greening, or it's, funding for larger scale events, things that drive membership. Maybe it's reducing some sort of burden for your neighborhood association to meet, whether it's a fee for hosting an event or hosting a meeting somewhere. There are a lot of things that could be used to increase the capacity of your neighborhood and of your communities. The goal, we say, is to get your neighborhoods ready for planning and implementation, but this is also good and worthwhile work to be funding in our communities anyway. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you. So the question was whether an entity that received a ARPA capacity building grant in our last year's funding cycle is eligible to apply for these funds. And the answer generally, if you meet all the eligibility criteria, is yes, but I want to clarify that these are extremely different funding programs. We are not going to be awarding. So the way that our ARPA capacity building grants is we made 6 grants of between 30 and $200,000 for capacity building. Here, we're making a single award of the full $400,000 to a single nonprofit that will then administer the small grants program, whereby they're not going to receive the funds for their own benefit. They're going to administer a small grants program to then provide $1, $5, and $10,000 grants to neighborhoods. And so if you're a neighborhood that's seeking capacity building support now, you should not apply for this RFP unless you want to administer a citywide program. You should instead wait for us to select the nonprofit that will administer the citywide program and then apply for a $1, $5, or $10,000 grant to that nonprofit. Uh, I can answer
Yeah,
this one.
please.
For the neighborhood implementation grant, please include all matching dollars that are connected to implementing the neighborhood plan. And so if there's a connection to implementing the neighborhood plan and you can tell that story and show that connection, please include that. Now, we do also, on top of that, want to see match dollars for the specific projects that you are undertaking. So the answer is both and. Please include match dollars that may be indirectly tied, but tied to the neighborhood implementation plan. But the matching requirement is for the project itself.
You use city sources for match dollars. So if you've got any other previous city of St. Louis awards, can you count that as match? Or if it impacts the projects that you're talking about in the fund?
Yeah, I think as a general matter, that answer is going to be no, because we really want to see private and philanthropic leverage. However, you can submit that question to us online and we'll post a public response. But no, we want to see the matching is private and philanthropic.
And those should all sources already. So
There should be, so what we want to see, and this is really based on choice neighborhoods, so this is the model, is a letter of commitment. And so what we would encourage you all to do is go to your partners in the community and essentially ask them if they have a commitment, if they are supporting the work of neighborhood plan implementation, to put that commitment in a letter to CDA.
just to put a finer point on it, so when it comes down to the dollars, are you asking for a general commitment or the one-to-one commitment of dollars? So maybe your funder hasn't yet said yes to funding that particular project, but you're saying you want to see, for example, let's say an aspect of your application includes a $20,000 project, you want to see a letter of commitment of from said private funder, yes, we need an additional 20,000 to either partially or fully fund this project.
I think that would certainly be stronger. I think that we will review the applications and I don't want to make a hard decision kind of on the fly right now in this meeting, but it would certainly make it stronger. I'll also add that the one-to-one matching commitment is overall, not for each subcomponent of the project. So say you're applying for $800,000 and it includes project 1, which is $500,000 for this community asset, and project 2, which is 100,000, project 3, which is 200,000. You don't need that one-to-one for 500,000, 100,000, 200,000. You need overall one-to-one for 800,000.
So any source that is related to any of the projects in our complete application can be used to match the complete.
Yes.
This is just kind of the awards are going to be 2 for roughly $800,000. Are we applying for $800,000 of work or $1.6 million worth of work with $800,000 in matching?
Yeah.
Noel, would you repeat that? Just this audio was, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just explaining that the application should be for whatever you seek in CDA grant funding, economic development sales tax funding. But then the budget that should be submitted should include your leverage, your committed leverage funds as substantiated by letters of commitment.
We're gonna let's do an experiment and bring in two voices from online. I'm gonna bring them into the room. Melinda, are you still there? Melinda?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Melinda, we can hear you, so we can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much. Each and every one of you speakers have been very clear in explaining what the different programs were. I thank you. I understand a lot today. I do have a question for Ms. Alexander, and I know eventually I understand I have a plan to meet with Mr. Roper to speak with Mr. Roper, regarding the O'Fallon community area. Yes. Hello there, Mr. Roper. Okay, yes, Ms. Alexander, when you had spoke about the community development grant, we are a not-for-profit, the O'Fallon Community Development Agents Organization. We do, yes, have some flat land. But if we want to apply for this 5 to 15 to do this one lot. So when we submit this application, we're submitting it because we want to do the work. We want to kind of contract it out ourselves. Let me see, am I answering that question correctly? We are going to employ and work with other smaller agencies, for example, like Forest Relief or, a Gateway Greening or even a neighboring nursery to help us improve that lot. So we can do that. Correct? Is that how we can submit the application that way?
Yeah, well, so what you would be doing is applying to the selected nonprofit.
Yes,
and then
ma'am.
administer that. So this grant program is for one entity, one nonprofit to administer the entire $500,000 or to
Okay.
award the entire $500,000 to organizations like yourself. So we're
Okay,
looking for one entity that has 500,000, and then organizations like yourself and other churches will apply with specific grants like you're talking about.
Okay, so it's the same thing. It's the same type of plan, format plan that Mr. Pfeiffer was speaking about. How the monies will go with each individual program. The monies will go to a big organization, and then that selected organization will divide the funds out. Okay.
Yeah, and so the reason for the purpose is CDA doesn't have the capacity to go directly to you, so it's going to one nonprofit and then they will go directly to you.
Okay. And my second question is to Mr. Roper. I'm not happy to see that the O'Fallon neighborhood, we don't have our development plan with you, but it's great that the other organizations have their plans in effect. I know they've been working on for a long time. Based on your experience, Mr. Roper, from beginning to end, how long does it take for our organization to have our official neighborhood plan in the books, documented with SLD? CDA, yes. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining this call and good to see you. So this neighborhood planning that Alexa and I will have been unrolling from the economic development tax the community will actually partner with a planner. So Alexa, myself, or someone else that we're hiring now. This planning process will take roughly around 12 to 13 months. This planning process will be free Well, it's already prepaid through the economic development tax, as Mr. Pfeffer has mentioned earlier. So we would bring consultants and resources to create a plan with the neighborhood and to adopt it. I do want to note that this is a little bit different than just if a neighborhood themselves came up with a plan themselves. Neighborhoods are free to come up with plans to guide themselves, but as far as an official plan that's adopted officially with the City of St. Louis's Planning Commission, that would be something that would have to go through this program. What is the timing on different neighborhoods, including O'Fallon? At this time, there is a request for proposals out, a different one than any of this, for 3 different planning areas. Unfortunately, none of those today include O'Fallon, the O'Fallon neighborhood. In the future, later this year, the Planning and Urban Design Agency, which Alexa and I work for, and also the Planning Commission would look to see which are the next neighborhoods after this year. So after this year, we have 3 different planning areas. There's about 15 or so neighborhoods, 16 neighborhoods that are undergoing planning this year. We'll look to see what are those for the next coming years soon.
Okay, we just hope that O'Fallon will be in that upcoming route as soon as possible. Yeah, we're just gonna work our due diligence to get.
I will keep that in mind.
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you both. Thank you. No more questions for me.
Well, we're gonna take one from the room.
I was on the Zoom call, but as I was following you guys, I know you have the designated neighborhoods, and I'm from Kings Highway East. And we have a lot of homeowners still existing over there and need some help. One thing that, I wanted to kind of clarify the lot. We have some trouble lots, especially on our lot. And I know you said you would look for one is to distribute the funds. If the lots, the trouble lots, and your words are there, not in those designated communities, can you still qualify for some assistance with getting some of these LRA lots together? Because I know we have one on my block, and it's unthinkable that it's in residential neighborhood. And me and some of the elderly and over there, we would like to know how we can help the city get their property together. We have some ideas, so we heard involved in ideas of bringing plant-based things to our community, and even trying to include any of the schools in it. But we're trying to get off the ground too, so if the city has a planning committee that could assist or even point us in direction, that is very helpful too. But the main thing is, can we get assistance if we're not in those 6 zones for some of the priority lots? That's the problem.
Go ahead and repeat it.
Thank you so much. That question was about for the community development grant program for vacant lot reactivation beautification. Whether or not you're in one of the 6 neighborhoods we identified. One clarification I want to make: the neighborhood plan implementation one is the only one that is tied to those 6 neighborhoods. For both the capacity building grant and the community development grant, those individual grants we anticipate being awarded all throughout the city. The actual scope of those. Oh, sorry, for the CDBG funded one, which is the vacant lots. The actual small grants will have to be awarded for work done in qualified census tracts, HUD qualified census tracts, and EJI tracts. That said, I think you said Kingsway East. Kingsway East, yeah, you 100% qualify. And also, I believe Jonathan and Alexa that Kingsway, or Jonathan, I'll let you talk to what I was about to say.
Oh, thank you, James, and thank you for your question. Right now, and I'm sorry for there's a lot going on with requests for proposals, a notice of funds available. So here's another one that wasn't really coming up today, but for separately, there is a request for proposals for neighborhood planning consulting services. And so one of the planning areas that we have first is the Ville, Greaterville, and Kingsway East as a planning area. And we're looking to start planning this summer there. This would look at actually making strategies, talking to yourself and other people in those communities about what they want to see for what's going down MLK, what's going down Natural Bridge, what's going down in the middle of the area, what's happening with the Economic Empowerment Center and a lot of other housing there. So we would actually and work with these guys too and other agencies, community members to develop that plan. We expect that timeline to be from around June or July of this year to June or July 2025. After that, you would also expect us, hopefully we'll have a meeting like this, where you would be able, Kingsway East, the Ville and Greaterville will be on a list similar to the other ones for a neighborhood planning implementation fund or something similar to it, so.
We're gonna take a few in the room, and then I do see there are several questions in the chat, so let's do.
Hey, pardon me, Tom. Can I like rapid fire hit some of the early ones from the chat? Because they
Let's
should be
go
pretty
ahead and hit
easy
the
to.
chat,
Okay,
because
sorry.
everyone there has been really patient. So just take the lead, James.
All right, wonderful. Yeah, I'll answer a couple ones from the chat real quick.
And go ahead and repeat them for the people in the room.
100%.
Yeah.
Dorothy Davis asked for the CDA capacity building grants, specifically the grants, not the administration. Can a nonprofit apply for these grants if they would like to bring programming for youth age 5 to 18? The scope of that grant program hasn't been written yet, but that sounds like a perfect opportunity for building capacity within your community.
Sure. Programming for youth is a great opportunity for you to apply with a regular CDBG cycle, public services. I don't think, and I'm pretty sure that any youth programming will not fit within the scope of these particular grants.
Quite simply because it will probably cost more than $1,500 or $10,000. Whereas in our CDBG funding cycle, which will open in July and run through September, we make larger public service awards.
Thank you. Another question, will these funding opportunities be rolled out again within 24-25? Specifically for the two grant programs, no, because these grant programs are intended to run through 2026. And then we'll reevaluate and see if we have the capacity and the unmet need to roll those programs out again. Can't really speak to that. Similar with neighborhood plan implementation, we can't speak to whether or not these funds will be available to be rolled out in a similar way, but the city and our department and other departments will be working to implement, future neighborhood plans as fully as we can.
And if I can add to that, all of that is subject to appropriation of funds. And we're also going to be learning from this pilot. This is the first time that the city has done a formal neighborhood plan implementation funding cycle. And so we'll take those learnings and then go through the appropriation process to continue funding for neighborhood plan implementation, but potentially in an updated form.
All right, let's do some in the room.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Krista.
So my question is related to the neighborhood plan implementation. I have. The quick question is, I see that within the last 6 years, the two oldest plans are hitting that 6-year limit this year. Is next year gonna say the last 7 years? Or is this like our last year to get in and then we're out of running?
We haven't reached a decision on that at this point.
That's fine, great, thank you. About the matching funds, and the, how in-kind donations will be looked at in those matching funds. And I have some follow-up questions with that, related to staff time, and I'll let you kind of take it away with that, and then I'll follow up with some answers.
The question was about in-kind donations and whether those would be counted. And the short answer is yes, in-kind donations are eligible. However, you do need to substantiate that cost, and it needs to be reasonable. And if it's not reasonable, then that'll obviously dock the application points. But again, we want that in-kind donation to be documented in a letter of commitment. And so you'll have an organization saying, here's our commitment to neighborhood plan implementation. And again, in my mind, I want to distinguish between a general commitment, a generic commitment to the plan's implementation, and a specific commitment to these projects. And so again, in my mind, a letter of commitment includes, here's our organization, we support this neighborhood plan, we think it's reflective of the community's will, and here's what we're doing to help implement the neighborhood plan at Ohio, here's what we've already done, and then here's how we're specifically committing to implement these proposed projects. And that can include cash, or it can include in-kind.
So that all makes sense. So within the in-kind donations and like the matching portion, because part is like within that is staff time. So when you have groups that are dedicating staff time. Committing
That count.
$30,000 in staff time.
The question, yeah. The question is about an in-kind donation in the form of the applicant's staff time. And the answer again is that that is an eligible source of leverage. The applicant's commitment is eligible. However, I would just note, where is that staff being funded from, and making sure it's a separate source. Yes, it is eligible. However, we don't expect it to be a large percentage. I think 10% as a kind of reasonableness test is a good starting point. But the core of this is neighborhood transformation. But we understand that community organizations need capacity in order to do that work.
Make sure we're repeating every question.
The question was about whether staff costs were an eligible cost, and the answer is yes, up to 10% of the total budget.
Neighborhood revitalization and neighborhood transformation. So I'm wondering how people write that into a grant when they, in some respects, they haven't really talked to the community yet or the neighborhood yet to discern what that transformation needs to look like and how it may be scored against everybody in the neighborhood. So I looked online, I couldn't find those types of definitions in the original law. So my concern is, depending on how big the transformation is not, will it be scored less? Even if you've had quality community engagement, said, all we want to do is do this, and it's not, how is it deemed to be transformation?
The question for those joining us virtually is, what is neighborhood transformation? What is neighborhood revitalization? How dramatic does the transformation, the impact need to be in order to qualify as neighborhood transformation? And I think what we're seeing here and looking for here is kind of imagine a before and after, right? This is the 3 to 5 square block geography that we're focusing in on. And here are the conditions today. And through this project, here is what the conditions will be in 3 years. And this is the change that we want to see in this community. You also asked about how do we ensure that the community really supports this work. And that is why the applicants who are eligible are those who are implementing a neighborhood plan. And the neighborhood plan should reflect the community's will. There's really 3 core principles here. 1, is it community driven? 2, is it place-based? 3, is it leveraged, right? And that is one way that we're also going to see transformation. Are you taking this, let's say $800,000 or $1 million grant and using it to leverage a larger private and philanthropic investment that will result in transformational catalytic impact.
Let's attempt to bring one more live question in, and then let's focus on the chat. There's a lot of very patient people there. So I think I'm bringing in Village Moms STL. Can you hear us, Village Moms?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, loud and clear. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, I'm Alicia Did. I'm with the Village of Moms. The question I have is that, so can you give us some examples of what should not be funded if one was to receive the grant from a chosen non-for-profit organization?
Could you say that again? It sounds like you're asking what is from
Yes.
one of the grants, what can they not fund for capacity building or the vacant lot activation?
Yeah, so let's say for instance, the Village of Moms was to apply for the grant, and we want to do something that may not necessarily be considered appropriate, so to speak. Can you give us some examples of what would be inappropriate in terms of how the funds are used, if that makes sense?
So the first question that I would ask is, are you referring to the capacity building grant or the vacancy to vibrancy grant?
Both.
Okay, so with respect to the vacancy grant, the community development grants, the only activity that is eligible there is activating a vacant lot, is investing in a vacant lot, beautifying that lot, whether that's a community garden or public art or even just maintaining it and clearing debris, or perhaps remediating it environmentally or et cetera. So essentially, I can give you a long list of eligible uses. I can't necessarily tell you everything that it cannot be used for, but that's with respect to vacancy. I'll toss it now to our team if anyone wants to share on capacity building, where we draw that line. I'll say that the first place that we draw that line is with respect to just the eligible uses of CDBG funds and of public funds.
The only thing that I would add to that is, of course, it can't be for any illegal use. That's the first thing. Are some things that are mandated right now that you could grow, you probably would not, right? On those vacant lots. And then also anything politically affiliated is not an allowable CDBG expenditure. But thank you for that question, because we're going to go and maybe post something in the FAQs, just a more defined ineligible use for that specific RFP.
Thank you, because I just want to make sure that was clear, because when you say the capacity building, a lot of people may have different definition of that, so I'm glad that you clarified that.
Yeah, and I'll just add one note towards the capacity building grants. We very much intend to build out the scope of the grant program with the awardee. We're going to rely on the expertise of the people who have administered grants like this in the past. I mean, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. Let's rely on our resident experts to build a program with us. So you will be learning more about allowable or disallowed grants as we build that program, and it will all be public and rolled out and shared online.
Unmute. There's just been a lot sitting in the chat, so I think we could probably rapid fire these. I'm just going to go down this list. And whoever on this panel wants to take them can go for it. We talked about youth. Will this be rolled out again?
Village
wouldn't be for individual applicants. So just keep in mind, this will be for like block units, neighborhood associations, this is for the vacant lot transformation, churches. It also, all activities have to take place within the city of St. Louis. So it's within city limits. So those are two other things, that I wanted to mention, because I can imagine that maybe a person may want to do something, but we're trying to grow a collective.
This is a good question from Bryce in the chat. Will all the organizations that are intending to apply, will we publish that list? So maybe we could facilitate some partnerships?
It's a really interesting idea. We can certainly look into it. I do wonder whether we would need to ask for folks' consent before publishing that. And so we can look into it. It's a good idea.
This is a good one from Samantha. For the neighborhood plan implementation grant, one of the questions in Salesforce is the activities table. This asks about the proposed activity budget and city department to administer. What is the ask of the city department here to communicate, to collaborate? Could we just expand on that section of the Salesforce
Right.
application portal?
Great question, Samantha. I think in a lot of cases that the answer there will be NA, not applicable. That's really designed for kind of as I alluded to earlier, the projects that involve a park improvement or some city department collaboration. Yeah, we have a follow-up question here in the room.
In the portal, it seems that there's activity budget tables in two places.
I may toss that to you. Anne on our team has been really leading the Salesforce implementation work. Yeah, the question here is that in the neighborhood plan implementation application portal, the budget and the activity actually shows up in two places. And so the question is how to approach that. And
And the answer is that those two tables are actually asking for two different sets of information, or at least they should be. If you see that the same questions are repeated, let me know. But one of them should be asking kind of broader budget-based questions. And then the second table should be breaking down every individual activity. We're looking for the activity name, the budget for that activity, the location, the partners. It really is going to get into the weeds for each of the proposed activities on the plan. But that being said, I'll check the portal and make sure that that wasn't duplicated, but they should be two separate tables answering two separate questions.
Still just going through this chat from Dana. I'm not sure which RFP or NOFA they're referring to, but asks, what is the allowable admin fee?
%10 for the economic development sales tax, but we should note a distinction between admin and program delivery. And so program delivery costs may be separate.
I don't see any raised hands. And if I'm missing anything in the chat that's really just relevant to the NOFA and RFPs we're talking about today, people on Zoom, repeat your question if we haven't gotten to it yet. So I'm not seeing any questions. Anything, team, up here that I'm missing, or anything that you all would like to expand upon? Okay.
Yeah, so there was one that just popped up here. Will churches who currently do not have a partnership with their organization, nor if they never received a grant previously, will they still be considered? Yeah, absolutely. If you apply to the once the nonprofit is selected and rolls out the grant program for the vacant lot revitalization, you can certainly apply as a church and for consideration.
There's another question I have heard.
Just a lot on vacant, wait, I purchased a vacant lot and have plans to build a building on it. Would that qualify me to apply for a vacancy grant? No, I don't think this would qualify for building a building. However, you should look into our housing RFPs in NOFA for that particular person, Janetta.
I'll add to that as Rashonda explained, the vacancy grants, the community development grants, are not going to be for construction. They're really to improve the land, whether that's community garden or clearing debris or perhaps even public art, but not the full construction of building, because $10,000 does not get you very far in construction. There are other opportunities available for construction funding, including, as Rashonda explained, our affordable housing notices of funding opportunities. But then another one that I wanted to flag is our upcoming CDBG funding cycle, which will include funding for public improvements. And so what we want to see there is the improvement going to be a community asset in some way? Is it going to serve low to moderate income individuals? Is it going to provide jobs? There's a variety of eligibility criteria that you can explore there. If you're not looking at housing, you'll want to look at that CDBG non-housing production RFP, which will be issued in July.
There's another good question in the chat and in the Q&A from Anonymous regarding neighborhood plan implementation. They say, sorry to beat a dead horse, but are you saying that applicants have to have a committed match on whatever money they request, like a 1-to-1 match?
Yes, that is correct. That is provided for in the NOFA. Again, that match can take a diverse array of forms. But we do want to see that match so we can leverage what are ultimately limited funds for maximum transformative impact.
We'll do one more while we're online here, and then get back to the room. Village of Moms asks, do you need a fiscal sponsor to apply for the grant once a nonprofit organization is selected? I assume that's if they're a non-incorporated group.
Can you repeat that one more time, Tommy? Sorry.
Verbatim, do you need a fiscal sponsor to apply for the grant once the nonprofit organization is selected? And I assume they're talking about the vacancy or the capacity building grant administration RFP.
Require it. But they should. Yeah, I would.
I think one of the things that we're looking for in both these small grants programs is for the nonprofit organization to propose a structure. I think here I could imagine the nonprofit taking two approaches. One, they could say, yes, absolutely, we're going to require a fiscal sponsor. Or B, they could say, we will serve as fiscal sponsor. If someone's applying for $5,000 and we select their application, we can serve as that fiscal sponsor. So I really think that we're going to have to hold on answering that question until we receive that application from the nonprofit and issue that formal invitation to apply for these small grants.
Great, let's go. Oh, hold on. Let's go ahead, as promised, we'll go back to the room.
I have another portal question. The neighborhood application grant, under the existing document templates, just wondering if there's a couple of forms missing. The authorized alien affidavit, the risk assessment, and then the certification relating to lobbying activities. I just noticed it was mentioned in the other one.
so there was. Sorry about that. So there was a question asked about some of the exhibits in the neighborhood plan implementation. We know that there was an error and a few of the exhibits didn't get uploaded or the incorrect version was uploaded. And so correct versions of all the exhibits will be posted on our website where you found the NOFA and the Q&A. So you will have them there, and they also will be uploaded or corrected on the Salesforce portal. So they should also be there as well.
Posted was about the whether or not if you are applying with multiple partners for the neighborhood implementation grant, how all the partners will be categorized. So, for example, the entity applying, we're assuming will be the applicant, but we're curious about how other partners will be labeled and how the money will flow. I think you guys answered that like the applicant would receive all funds, but then trying to understand how the partners will be viewed and how they get the money through their role in the
I'll repeat the question. So for the neighborhood plan implementation grant, we've invited people to apply as teams. And there was a question that was answered in our Q&A about what is going to be the classification of the non-lead applicant and how is that going to affect the funds and the kind of the flow of funds through the grant. So let's start here. When I talk about a lead applicant, in the portal, there needs to be one team, organization, entity that we're referring to as the lead applicant. This is the party that submits the application and is the main point of contact. Our current intention is to administer the funding directly to that party. I do also kind of want to clarify, when I'm talking about team members here, we're really thinking that this is going to be a team effort, not that organization A is going to apply for one project and organization B will apply for another project, and the two should never talk and never meet and the fund will go separately. The ideal is that one organization is going to receive the funding and then they will work with their partners to fund the different parts of all those projects, which the group should be involved in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it sounds like the lead applicant will administer it. And so if partner A needs money or spends money to implement a piece, then they will go to the lead. They will get the receipts, their invoices, everything to the lead applicant, and then they can get them reimbursed.
Our goal is to have one financial point of contact with each team. If for some reason you have an application where you think the best way to administer it is with multiple financial points of contact, that's something that should be in the proposal and something that we will consider, but that's at least what we're expecting to receive right now.
Will be.
Anything that you put in an application that's not ineligible, we will read, we will consider it, and we will score it appropriately.
I think it's pretty important to note about this question. If a church needs repairs, if those repairs are written into the grant/proposal, is that allowed, or does the church have to be free of repairs? So we will not, CDBG funds cannot be used for repairs to the church, but for vacant lots, if a church is going to revitalize a vacant lot, absolutely it can be used for that purpose, but not for any actual church repairs. And also a match in the form of rent/space and usage would not be considered a match.
And the rule, let me note, on the church question, is with respect to federal funds may not be used to support inherently religious activities. And so if the church has vacant lots that they want to use as a garden, that's not an inherently religious activity that can be supported. If we're talking about repairs to the literal church building, that is. There may be a gray area where if there's a basement of a church that is used as a food pantry, and we can certainly explore those with you all. But as a general rule, and kind of we are risk averse and want to avoid violating federal law. Federal law provides that federal funds may not be used to support inherently religious activities.
Okay, I'm not seeing hands raised in the room or here in Zoom. And so we do have a few. Should be in the form of brain. There is a new question in the Q&A. VW Baker asks, can the match be in the form of rent/space usage? That sounds like in kind.
Lashonda just answered.
Okay. I do not see any new questions unless there's anything I'm missing.
Questions that are inviting for the in-person group.
I don't see any new questions. I would like to invite folks both virtually or here in person to share any feedback that they have on the portal thus far.
Oh boy.
I asked for character counts, but thank you for the response that I took that to mean just like don't kill yourself, just make sure everything is really clear about the project, but if someone else has a grant character counts to ranks and playing field and all of that.
Folks in the room requested the addition of character counts, which we are working on.
For people in the room, there are a few in the Q&A that we answered in the chat. I believe we can get a transcript of this chat and we'll post minutes and Q&As from this meeting. So everyone in both digital and physical spheres has the same information. Nan, are there anything super relevant that you think we should read out to the group here?
We'll post everything.
We'll post everything. Okay. Doretha, can you go ahead and unmute? Okay. Well, let's pause.
Another question from
Just one.
Yeah.
This is just a little thing about the portal. I didn't realize it, but I was creating new applications, so I don't know if other people realize that tab at the top is keeping track of every time you're being like saved for later. So if you go back, make sure you're using the right application. It doesn't seem like there's a way to delete start.
Can I clarify?
Go ahead.
Okay. I was gonna clarify.
It's me. We're good. Okay, you're ready.
I just repeat, there was a comment that additional applications are being created in the portal and that it's not possible to delete applications. So what I wanted to clarify is, are you accidentally, or is the portal accidentally creating multiple, let's say, neighborhood plan implementation applications? And are you able to go and click, there should be a tab that's like my applications or something like that. Are you able to get to there to edit the existing applications, or can you explain a little bit more about what's going on?
Yeah, if you don't realize that as you start and click save for later, without So let's say you've gone into the portal 2 times. The first time you saved something and left. The next time you come, even though you haven't uploaded anything, you're thinking, I'm starting over. The system is actually creating a new application for you. And if you have not discovered my applications, you don't realize that yesterday it also saved one. So you might have a list of, let's say you've been testing around in there, you might have a list of 5 applications. So as you're applying, you want to make sure you click on the right one since you can't delete it or maybe create a new account.
Okay, that's really, so I'm gonna guess that it would probably, would one way to improve this be to have the My Application be the homepage rather than the list of applications be the homepage? That is very good feedback, thank you.
There's also a question, if an agency wants to create book boxes or an activity bench using the small grant, would that be acceptable? Absolutely, yes, it would be an acceptable use on any vacant land. We would love that.
Not seeing, Rashonda, could you just repeat that question really quickly? That was a great question and an awesome eligible use.
Yeah, so we have, if an agency wants to create book boxes or activity bench using a small grant, would that be acceptable? And for the revitalization of vacant lots, it absolutely would be acceptable. So if you would like to, please apply and offer that.
Rashonda, related, there's a good question. This church has an idea for a community program. It's an outdoor basketball court and will be on church grounds. And it's a community activation program, but would be developed by a church. Is this something that could be funded?
I can speak to that, and it really gets pretty fact specific. So I would encourage you all to submit that question to us in writing, and we can post a response. It certainly doesn't sound inherently religious. However, I want to flag that federal requirements also prohibit federal money cannot be used to discriminate against a person seeking that service, right? So if that basketball court is, or that basketball program is open to the community broadly, then that could be eligible. We'd again have to look into it. If, on the other hand, that program is solely for members of the church, then it could become a problem from a federal compliance perspective. So it really it's fact specific. But it could be depending on those facts.
I think we're getting through these questions and people are kind of starting to leave the Zoom, but I think we have our favorite type of question, and it's from Anonymous, and it says, what would procurement requirements look like? Do we need to have all of our partners lined up? This is regarding neighborhood implementation plan.
Yeah,
We love procurement.
I can speak to that. So if the application, if you apply with a contractor identified or with a partner identified, then our selection of your application also includes our selection of that contracting partner, and you would not have to conduct additional procurement. So if you identify that partner and you have that letter of commitment from them that says we're engaged, we're ready to do this work, and that's part of your budget, and you say this funding is going to go to this contractor to do this thing, then that is eligible, provided it's an eligible use more broadly, and you would not have to re-procure that entity that is part of your application. If, on the other hand, you're applying to, say, stabilize a building to turn into a community space or what have you, or an early childcare center, or whatever asset the neighborhood plan calls for, and you don't identify that general contractor, then you would need to bid that out and conduct procurement. Formal procurement for anything above $250,000, informal procurement for anything under that simplified acquisition threshold. And no procurement would be needed under $10,000. There does still need to be a reasonableness analysis, but no formal or informal procurement.
Here we have Melinda has her hand raised. Again, we're gonna try and bring Melinda in. Melinda, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, guys. This is God. Fine. Some organizations here, we were speaking about.
Melinda, could you get a little closer to your microphone? You're really cutting
Okay.
in and out.
Is it better? Am I better?
Yes.
Okay, great. Your phone organization.
Melinda, we just can't hear you. Could you get close to your mic?
Hello.
Hello?
Yep, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, boy. Oh, great, you can hear me, great, okay. We just met we just met this past Saturday, the O'Fallon organization, and we were speaking to the community about a beautification plan for O'Fallon Park, and we were speaking about we were going to use our own little funds to plant a lot of flowers and, all tall freestanding stuff. But I do recall hearing earlier in this session that someone spoke about if we were going to do some beautifications, and we were going to do it something related with the parks, we may need to speak with the local parks department. Could you guys explain? Because heck, I believe the parks department's got a lot more money than we do, or maybe they can work a lot faster than doing with these beautifications. So could you guys explain that again to me, please?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for that question, Melinda, and we're happy to connect you to the Parks Department if that would be helpful. Definitely commend you and your community for coming together to beautify it, but encourage you to talk to the Parks Department, both because to your point, they may have additional resources and be able to support the work, and also because they're ultimately responsible for maintaining any improvements that you put in there. And so we'd be happy to help facilitate that connection if that would be helpful.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, repeating, so I was on mute. I'm not seeing any hands in the chat or connections. Um, sorry, I'm distracted. In the room, are there any additional questions? Count to
Here.
10?
Is there a portal that the homepage would be emailed that address?
The question was, if you face difficulties with the portal, do you email that address? And the answer is yes, cdanofa@stlouis-mo.gov for any difficulties you face with any of our applications. Thank you all so much again for taking the time out of this beautiful day to join us today. And we look forward to seeing your applications. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.